This is crucial to what it means to be part of civilization, specifically to be part of Western civilization. This is not an Ayn Rand Institute issue. This is not an issue for radicals. This is not an issue for left or for right. This is an issue that goes to the core of what Western civilization is about, what Western civilization stands for. So what is Western civilization? What does it stand for? Why does free speech matter in this context? Those are important questions, which nobody, by the way, is asking, and certainly nobody's answering. There's a huge disagreement about what Western civilization is. And let me say right up front, Western civilization is not about geography. Western civilization is about ideas. Very specific ideas that are specifically Western. We call them Western because they come out of Western Europe. That's why they're Western. In many respects, they come out of France. Makes this all the more tragic. So what is Western civilization? Where did Western civilization come from? So in my view, Western civilization is really the product of a specific era in the history of Western Europe. And that specific era we call the Age of Enlightenment. And the Age of Enlightenment is about what idea? What is the idea central to the Age of Enlightenment? You can yell it out. Reason. The other name for the Age of Enlightenment was the Age of Reason. So the Enlightenment sets reason as the most important idea. The thinkers of the Enlightenment understand that reason is the means by which human beings survive. It is the way in which we thrive. It is the essential value that we as human beings require in order to be successful. Now, this is an identification that Aristotle makes in Greece way before that, right? But for the first time, there's a whole period that embraces that idea. The first time in human history. Embraces the idea that knowledge, the source of knowledge, is our senses, is our ability to observe, to integrate, to understand, to conceptualize the reality around us. That is a huge breakthrough in human history. And for this to be part of a whole culture, and that's what the 18th century was. It was a culture that at least tried to be a culture of reason. Who's the first figure, really, of the Enlightenment? Newton, right? A scientist. And this is important because Newton's the first one, the first human being, really, to show us the power of science, to explain the world in multiple dimensions. So, for the first time in human history, we can see that this is how knowledge comes about, through a specific method, a scientific method, the method of reasoning, rather than through revelation, rather than through the Pope, rather than through communion with some other dimension. The knowledge is possible here, and knowledge is possible for whom? For everyone. Because as human beings, we all possess this faculty of reason, this capacity to think, this capacity to use our mind. And this idea is spreading through Europe. And part of this idea of reason, is shrugging off what ideas? The ideas of religion. The ideas of mysticism. Part of it is the rejection. An essential part of it is the rejection of the whole way in which religion operates, both in terms of knowledge that comes to us through revelation, but also in terms of how we arbitrate disputes. Because what's going on in Europe leading up to the Age of Enlightenment? What are Europeans doing to one another? Yeah, they're killing each other. I mean, on a massive scale. We think wars are brutal today. You should read about these wars. And they were called things like 100-year wars, right? Talk about long engagements. That's long, right? 30-year wars. Catholics killing Protestants, Protestants killing Catholics, right? All over Europe. People being slaughtered. Why? Because they disagree. Because they disagree. And the only method to resolve a disagreement was what? It was force. It was force. Reason and the efficacy of reason, raising the efficacy of reason as a primary, says, no, there's another way to deal with disagreement. Reason, argument, fact, discussion. And the people in the age of enlightenment are sick of the religious intolerance of the period before them. They're sick of the wars. They're sick of the violence. They're sick of the killing. Right? And they're standing up against this, and they're saying, no, enough. This is not how we deal with disagreements. This is not human. This is not what it means to be human, to kill one another over disagreements of ideas. Right? There is a method. Let's engage in this method to resolve these ideas. So the core of the Enlightenment is this idea of reason and the ability to express oneself. The thoughts, the new discoveries, the new ideas, some of them good, some of them bad, some of them right, some of them wrong. I'm sure there was a lot of bad science. There was a lot of bad philosophy. There was a lot of bad ideas. But the idea was that you could express them, you could test them out there, you could debate them, you could discuss them, you could argue them. And that's how you engaged with one another. That was the method by which we engaged with one another. And it was wrong. It was wrong to try and impose by force your ideas on somebody else. It was wrong to kill people because you disagreed. That was barbarism, they considered. And they understood it to be. And it was crucial that that ability to exchange ideas freely, to come up with ideas, to express ideas, that had to be protected. And they understood that ideas offend. You know, there's a big deal here, right? About, ooh, this is offensive. Yeah, if you're Muslim, that's pretty offensive. So? Was Newton offensive? Absolutely. I mean, he offended the Catholic Church. He offended everybody who believed that to explain nature, you had to have mystical revelation. He disagreed with them. I'm sure they took it personally. Right? I'm sure they were very upset. And if he had been born a couple of centuries earlier, they might have actually burnt him at the stake, which they did to many scientists and many thinkers just a little bit before Newton. Think about what they did to Galileo. Didn't quite burn him at the stake, but they put him in house arrest. Many others got burnt. That's how you dealt with people who offended you. The Enlightenment is the first era in which that's not acceptable, at least not to the intellectuals. Voltaire, a key figure in the Enlightenment, still has to escape France because he fears for his life, because he challenges religion.
What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute. That man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it. And that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason. A morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
How does objectivism differ from the philosophies that many of us have been exposed to in our youths? Philosophies based upon religions, theologians, dogmatists.
The very first difference, objectivism tells you that it is not right, it is not proper to man to take anything on faith. Religion is a matter of faith. You accept a religion emotionally or because you were born to it. You have not chosen it rationally. What objectivism will tell you is that reason Man's reason is his basic means of survival. That is the most important faculty which he has, and he has to guide his life and make his choices by means of his rational faculty. He has to make his own choices, but he has to know how to make them. It is immoral for him to act on his emotions, to be guided by the whim of the moment. That objectivism holds as very wrong, very immoral. And morality, in fact, consists of following your reason to the best of your ability. So that rationality is the basic virtue from which all the others proceed.